Okay, so we are now on the shading part of our work. We have two ways to do this, but we are going to employ both. We can bring each part to a finish, like the eyes, the nose, the mouth. Like finish one eye, then do the other one. Or we can use the most solid approach to bring out everything at once by slowly building each part from the face to the eyes and nose and mouth, like that, and together bring them up slowly so we can balance each part and the entire artwork. We can bring the entire artwork to a finish in a balance. We will do just that by first adding a light shade to the face, shading the shadow parts lightly, and moving on from there. So I'll see you after the intro. Okay, so we're going to need scratch paper. I have a office pad here and our charcoal. I placed it inside a ceramic plate, and of course our brushes. This is a watercolor brush and it's a cheap brush. Again, I find that these watercolor brushes are excellent for shading. First, we're going to load our brush with charcoal powder. These are from shavings, and then just rub them on our scratch paper so we can have even amounts of charcoal in there. So we don't have to rub them thoroughly, but we can do this repeatedly if our brushes are new or newly washed. So the important thing is we have an even amount of load in our brushes. So here I'm pointing out the areas that we will be shading. As you can see at the reference at the left, I'm marking out where we're going to come from, shading this face, just a light shade and a single direction like this. So you can see that it's very light. I'm not pressing the brush, I'm just floating the brush on top of the paper and just gently caressing the paper, and you can see the shade there. It's very light. Okay, just following the contours there, not concerned of hard edges. This is supposed to be a very soft edge that we're creating here. Just a general shade, a blurred shade, just to cover certain areas, to bring out the forms a little bit. But of course we keep within the scope of the shade as much as possible, but we do not obsess over it. So as you can see here, where the darkest parts are there, I repeat the brush stroke continually, being patient, not overreacting, not pressing it too hard or anything, not doing it too fast, knowing that every stroke will darken that area as long as the brush has powder on it. Now, just being patient and watching things as they become darker and darker. And if you cannot see, or you need to see a dark shade, then it's important to close your eyes for a few seconds so your eyes will be refreshed, so you can actually see the shade on paper and not go overboard. So here I'm shading the parts that have the shadows there on the mouth area and on the cheeks. So you can see it's basically an even shade. It's not totally even like 100%, but basically the value range is very close. It's just on the number 2 value range, so it's just next to white. So it's not really dark or anything. It's not even a mid-tone. It's just a very light shade, just to begin marking out those shades there. So sometimes you will need to cross strokes, and that's fine. Just remember that each flow of the face, you can see the shape of the face here, that each flow of your brush will intersect, and that will create a darker value at the middle of the intersection. But that's fine, just don't obsess over it. Just find the spot where the darkest area, and you know when to mark. So I think from my experience in reality, when shadows fall on our face, they are actually intersecting. We can see that here when we move to the bottom area of the chin. You can see how the cross mark intersects. But right now, I'm just using what's left on the brush, just very lightly shading that. No fear. Just shade it. No loading of the brush with too much charcoal. Just shading it. Not worrying. Just having a flat shade there. It's just really flat. There's actually just two values there, the shaded and then the raw paper. So we don't have to worry too much. If you're concerned about intersecting your brush strokes and having darker spots that are undesired, the best strategy there is to start shading the darker areas, darker spot, and then shading the lighter spot after that, so that when the two brush strokes intersect, the spot that has the darkest value will be the one intersected, and you're going to have a correct shading. So here, look at this. I'm shading the below the mouth here. I'm repeating some strokes at this corner here, because knowing that's a darker area, of course, so I repeat it twice so it's a little bit darker, and then just proceeding to intersect those lines. Look at that. I stretch out the brush stroke further ahead in the face, and you get this darker spot which you can find at the reference by intersecting these lines, which are of course just shapes on the face. Of course, if you know the basic shapes of the face, the planes, you can see that it's actually there in the reference. So that's a very efficient way of shading. So like I said, even though we want just a shade, a single shade, we're not going to limit ourselves to that, of course. Right here you can see I'm trying to darken this spot here, to reinforce that spot as a darker area. Okay, so I'm not really limiting myself to the single shade, but I'm moving the shapes. I'm shading the forms more and more, because we're still going to add more shades to this later on, make it darker. This is not the final shade, of course. This is just very light shading. Of course, when you look at the result there at the bottom of the mouth, you can see volume already forming, right? So at least as we move on here, we are developing the volume slowly, having the lighter shade in place. So when we add the darker shades later on, these shapes are going to pop. Basically, we are planting the shades here. We are marking our shadow areas and form of the shading the forms with the light value that later on we're going to paint over the entire face after darkening these shadows and correcting them and adding hard edges to where it's needed, and etc. But we're going to see that later on. So basically right now we're just trying to mark where the shadows are, while informing ourselves of where these forms, how these forms look like, while being safe, not doing too much dark so we don't make mistakes, but still preparing ourselves so that later on when we darken these shades, we're going to have a correct positioning, or our forms will be correct, and we will have a gauge to what value we are going to need to produce a 3D rendering of our subject. Speeding up the video here, but I'm just going to make a comment as this process continues here, that most beginners, just like me before, this is very easy to achieve. Okay, we achieve this stage, this type of shading as a beginner, and that's not a problem really. It's just that we need to add more to it to make it more 3D. So we just need patience, and if we really want to get results fast, then of course we're just going to be stuck with this at this level. But that's not a mistake really. You just have to continue the work, which I'm going to show you later. So as you can see here, I'm just darkening this side, the bottom, the hand, and the face. I'm just filling the face with a little bit of shading. So this is where we are at right now, this stage. Next, we're going to work with her left eye. But as you can see here, we have done the shading, and it looks fine. We have a little bit of volume now in our face, but this is not the end. Okay, so we need to work on these shades more later on, and alongside working with the facial features. So we're going to do that, and while we're doing that, we're of course revealing to ourselves more what we need to add to our face, so that the face will look better. And of course in this case we also have a hand, and so basically I just what we did here is darken the lower parts of the entire image, knowing that this part will always be darker because the light is just coming from this from her left side here. And of course the hands have a different local value, have a darker local value. So the mouth, we're going to work on them later on, the mouth, the nose, and the other eyes. So we're going to start working on the individual parts later on, and correcting as we go. After having anchor points like that, we're going to know where and what to do. So I'll see you then.